In 1963, a voice came through in a darkened room in London. The voice claimed to have belonged to a woman who had been dead for over a century. What she had to say about the world beyond was not what anyone expected. In the following story, 6 families in 6 different countries found themselves sharing their homes with something they could not explain, something they did not want to leave. These are intriguing ghost encounters from the other side. The following is an edited conversation that took place on April the 29th, 1963 with Elizabeth Fry, who was born in 1780 in Norwich, UK, and was a prison reformer, social reformer and Quaker. Fry passed away in 1845. She's in conversation with George Woods and Betty Green, and the medium was Leslie Flint. George Woods asked the first question. Could you tell us something about what happens on the other side? The different orders of that side. What happens to these people who make bombs and are out to destroy and are destructive? Elizabeth Fry. Well, I suppose that the question can be answered in a sense in one sentence. As a man sows, so shall he reap. And if a man in your world creates a condition of havoc and unhappiness and is only concerned with material things, then obviously when he comes here, he will find himself on a plane which is very similar to Earth. He will be living a very material conception of life because the man has not changed. Death does not change a person immediately. A person is very much the same, and until such time as the man himself begins to realize that he is living in a condition of life that he himself has built. Then, and until he changes and begins to search within himself to discover his faults and rectifies them, he will be living in a condition very similar to the Earth. He'll be living in a material mental state. That is what happens to individuals when they leave your world. They live in a condition of life created by their state of mind. Of course, the person who has lived a reasonably good life will find himself in an atmosphere which is congenial and pleasant. He will find that he will have every opportunity to experience many things that perhaps were denied him on Earth. For instance, you may have someone who, by the circumstance of the earthly life, were made to live an unhappy and dreary existence, but by their very nature endeavour to be kind and considerate, will find a very happy condition of existence, and those opportunities will be presented here. For instance, you may have someone who would have liked to have been a musician or an artist, or somebody who perhaps would have loved to have had a beautiful garden, will find that they have a house with a very beautiful garden. If they wanted to become a musician over here, they can be a musician. Everything here is organised, although there is, in a sense, no organisation here. Everything is in its place, but there is no conscious organisation. Here you will have every opportunity to settle and to be happy, but great possibilities and greater things will lie ahead because nothing is static here. Everything has an opportunity for change, and if a person begins to change in themselves and desires a better order, gradually they will find those conditions. It's all a state of being, a state of mind. It's a state of consciousness, and one contributes towards this, and therefore you'll find yourself in a congenial atmosphere for which you are best suited. The average person coming here finds a happy state of being and a great opportunity for knowledge, experience, and rest, if it's necessary. There is no depression unless the person coming here has a great deal that they have cause to regret in their makeup and in their life. People do go through a state of readjustment where they assess themselves and begin to feel they could have done so differently when on Earth, and they could have helped so much more than they did. Self-centered people find things very difficult at first, but everyone eventually finds a state of existence which one could call happiness. It is never denied, but everyone must earn it. Everyone goes through stages of evolution until they have reached a certain goal and will stay in that environment until they feel the need to go further. Although there are many people who are earthbound, who never really left the Earth and are on an earthly state of consciousness, an earthly plane. They often cause some concern to people on your side who are aware of poltergeists, who are aware of interference. You do get souls who are materialistic minded and got a great deal of pleasure in influencing people on your side, especially people who open up their consciousness to these influences. Not enough is understood about the Earth souls. Although they've passed from your world, are still very much part of it. these earthbound creatures are not necessarily evil, though there are some, of course, that are in themselves not doing anything that is working out their own salvation and are receiving a great deal of pleasure by utilizing people on your side. I'm quite sure that many of the people in mental hospitals in your world are under the influence of earthbound spirits, and I think it is a great tragedy that this subject is not better understood amongst the medical profession. On this side, we have many souls who work in groups, who endeavour to help and take away, where possible, these influences. But sometimes it is very difficult to do very much about it, and although there are no laws, as there are no actual leaders. A person here does not give orders. We have groups of souls who do special work, that we are all interwoven and are all very conscious of this oneness of spirit. Here, no one glories in being a leader, whereas in your world, in religious organizations and political organizations, you get this glorification of the individual. The first thing a person must learn here is to lose that idea of self-importance. Everything that we do here is done in complete love and harmony, and no one wants to override another person. We do not recognize leaders in the sense that you do. God is not found in buildings or places. God is found within one's soul, within one's inner consciousness, and all that is of nature. I don't think that any human being who truly seeks God will find God in something which is man-constructed. For man in his foolishness and his ignorance considers that he must build edifices to house something which is so much of the spirit. You cannot contain the spirit in a casket. It is something that is as free as the air you breathe, and you must become conscious and aware of it. Souls from this side who truly progress have broken all the bonds and shackles that have bound them through centuries of wrong thinking. To find that great truth that all men truly seek can only come when they begin to put the house of God in order. For there is a house of God, but it is not a building, it is the temple of the soul. We're not talking individually, but in a collective sense, because the Spirit of God is within all men. It is a force and a power that nothing can destroy. One may lose the body, but one gains the soul, and as one gains experience and knowledge, one realizes the tremendous power of spirit that overcomes all things. Man will only find truth when he takes away from himself the shackles that have bound him for centuries. God is found among those who are wise in their simplicity, and it is in simplicity that we find truth, not among those in high places who through books and learning and through other methods have assumed that they are spiritually wise. Spiritual wisdom comes from those who have sought within themselves and found the germ of truth and the realization of it. As you serve others, you become more aware of God's wisdom and truth. The power of the Spirit that is around you is all the time endeavoring to break through and open the consciousness of others. Betty Green. What happens when people like royalty pass over, who have been used to comfort and have no worries of finance? Everything is done for them. They don't know what it is to be poor or hungry. Elizabeth Fry. A person may have nothing and be an extremely good person, or a person may have everything that the world offers and also be a good person. I think the whole thing surely depends on whether that person in that position has truly and conscientiously served to the best of their ability in the calling that they've been given. I don't think it matters one iota whether they live in a palace or in a cottage. They will find when they come here that they will be given a condition of life which will be most suited to them. It doesn't necessarily have to be a palace, because surely there must be many people who have lived in palaces and still live in palaces who, if the truth were known, are glad to relax in just perhaps 1 or 2 rooms. They don't particularly want the pomp and the ceremony. It's part of their heritage, it's part of their background, they've had to accept it through birth, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are particularly fond of it. It may well be that they've accepted it because it is something they have to accept. But at heart, they may be fundamentally very good and very sincere and very humble people. Because a person has been used to a palace, they would assume they should have a palace. I don't think it even matters, because I am quite sure there are plenty of people who have lived in a cottage who, when they come here, would like to live in a palace and probably deserve one. And there are plenty of people who live in palaces who, when they come here, would like to live in a cottage. I think we must not take this purely on the material basis that the reflection of the earth life would be the same here. I have met so-called kings and queens. Here we have no kings and queens. In certain cases, people of high order, materially that is, who have been used to so much deference and have been given everything that the earth seems to offer, there are certain cases of individuals here who have found it very difficult to shake off the sort of atmosphere and attitude of mind. That is something that they have to learn. Fundamentally, all humanity is the same. What is so wonderful is that here they still retain their individuality. If it were not so, we would never recognize each other, and that of course would be very tragic. A very unhappy state of affairs for people who are very close to others. When a person first comes here, they are very much the same when their relations join them. The spiritual body is an exact counterpart of the physical body. That is, if the physical body itself is in a perfect condition or perfect state. If the physical body has degenerated with age or through illness or something has happened to it by accident, it is only the physical body that has those marring conditions. The spiritual body would be a reproduction of the perfect physical body. No one needs fear that they will not recognize a loved one. We must remember that all life here is a state of mind, and the only things that are created are thoughts. Your world is completely apart from nature, that is, a thought world. Man is no more than he thinks. All that you have around you and about you that has been created by generations of men has fundamentally been brought about by the power of thought. We are the same. We bring with us our personality, our character, and our thought ability. We create our life by our power of thought. No one needs worry that when a person passes, they will be so changed beyond all recognition. The only change is something which we bring about by our change of outlook and development. It's a gradual process that I don't think any generation needs to fear, not recognizing a previous generation, because time itself is of no importance. It takes generations and generations of time for people to progress to the extent that will become unrecognizable. This is a tremendously difficult subject at times to clarify, because there is so much that we'd like to give you, where words in themselves are inadequate and cannot depict or describe. Therefore, we can only bring things to a certain level so that you can grasp it. But I feel sure that each and every one who seeks from your side the truth that the word of spirit can give will find according to their searching, according to their sincerity of purpose. But when man can release himself from all these bonds which have chained him down, which have closed his mind for generations, when a man can free himself from the ties that have bound him to a creed and dogma that have held him back from progressing, from searching, from seeking, when man is truly free, spiritually free, then he will discover and open up tremendous avenues of spiritual progression. George Woods. We see so many little children with no chance in life at all, but there's so much wealth. They seem to have no hope whatsoever, and some may become criminals. Elizabeth Fry. Well, you cannot blame a child who, through circumstances beyond their control, has become ill-mannered, who does things that are not accepted. We must always remember that people are the product of their environment. And if that environment has been created because of the selfishness of the few, then you can hardly blame the individual. There are many things which take time to be brought into reorganization and change. Don't think that for one moment that any soul that comes here is in any way judged. A person is responsible to themselves for their actions, but every conceivable avenue is taken into consideration in regard to an individual. But there again, it is not others that do the judging, it's oneself. If a person knows when they come here that they've done many things that were wrong, but they realise that it was due to environment and conditions, which to a great extent were beyond their control, there are those redeeming features. All that is considered. I don't think that there is one solitary thing that one can mention in regard to life here that is not just. Everything is just, because everything here falls into a condition of natural law and order. Every individual sorts himself out. Not others do it for you. You were perhaps helped or often shown the path and advised, but no one can be forced to do anything. No one can be made to change. A person changes subtly, gradually. They don't suddenly become people of great wisdom, people of great spiritual attainment. Everyone gradually evolves, and the worst criminal gradually evolves into the better person, the more advanced person. It may take eons of time, but time is infinitesimal to us because we are in eternity, and there is no time in eternity. There can be a kind of consciousness of time, and on the lower spheres there is this consciousness of time, but it's purely a reflection of the material. I wish one could explain this more fully, but it's impossible. For instance, in your world, you can see so far and you can see no further, and yet as you travel forward, you are approaching that which was before out of sight. So it is with us. We have perspective, we can see so far, and as we are travelling forward, other aspects of perspective come into view. Other parts of existence and life that we didn't know existed gradually become within our conscious range. You must look upon eternal life as a gradual process marching forward, and as one is going forward, new vistas strike the horizon, and as you approach them, they become more clear, and you see a different picture and a different scene. That is why different souls from different spheres must surely depict life rather differently, one to another. It all depends on the individual, how far they have progressed, and what their experiences are. I think this is the most wonderful thing, that we can, for a few brief moments of your earthly time, link with you and talk with you, discuss with you, and as far as it's in our power, help and guide you. And that's why you are doing this work to help others. Surely it is the greatest thing of all. Go forward, my friends, in strength, and know that you are highly blessed. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit like. It really helps to keep the channel growing. And if you're new here, subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest videos. We've got lots of strange and fascinating stories coming up, and we'd love to have you along for the journey. The classic symptoms of a poltergeist haunting are chairs moving by themselves, unexplained banging, implements disappearing, then suddenly turning up days later in the same place or somewhere different, or water dripping from the ceiling. Poltergeist is German for noisy ghost, and the phenomena is usually credited to mischievous spirits, and cases have been cited almost since the beginning of recorded history. Although many hauntings have been accredited to ghosts, there are poltergeist incidents that have been centered around a living agent, such as a child or teenager. The following are 6 true poltergeist stories that might make you shiver next time there is an unexplainable noise or incident in your home. Number 6. The Thornton Heath Poltergeist. In the 1970s in Thornton Heath, England, a family was tormented by a poltergeist that began one August night when they were woken in the middle of the night by their blaring bedside radio that somehow turned itself on. This was the beginning of a series of events that lasted almost 4 years. A lampshade was repeatedly knocked to the floor by an unseen force, and in Christmas 1972, an ornament was hurled across the room, smashing into the husband's forehead. As the husband was recovering from that ordeal, the Christmas tree started to violently shake. The following year the activity worsened when footsteps walked across the bedroom floors when there was no one there, and one night their son awoke to find a man in an old-fashioned dress staring threateningly at him. One evening, when the family was entertaining, there was a loud knocking at the front door, where the door was then flung open and all the house lights came on. They tried having the house exorcised, but it seemed to escalate things when objects flew through the air and there were loud noises. And then the family heard what sounded like a large piece of furniture crashing to the floor, and when they went to investigate, found nothing was disturbed. A meeting was consulted and told the family that the house was haunted by a farmer of the name Chatterton, who considered the family trespassers on his property. On further investigations, they found that a family called Chatterton had indeed lived in the house in the mid-18th century. It appears that the noises were now becoming apparitions, when an elderly grey-haired woman dressed in a pinafore, with her hair tied back in a bun, who was probably Chatterton's wife, would follow the wife up the stairs, and as the wife turned around only to see the elderly lady disappear into the shadows. The family even reported seeing the farmer appear on their television screens wearing a black jacket with wide pointed lapels, high-neck shirt and a black cravat. The family eventually moved out of the house, and strangely though, none of the subsequent residents complained of any unusual activity. Number 5. The Indianapolis Poltergeist. In 1962, 3 generations of women lived together at 2910 North Delaware Street, Indianapolis. The head of the house was Renata Beck, who shared the home with a mother and a teenage daughter. Apparently the 3 women didn't get along and would regularly fight. The family tensions were then escalated by a string of unusual activity that began the evening of March the 11th. The first thing the women noticed was a beer mug moving by itself, and later a large bang came from upstairs, and the women found that a crystal ornament had been thrown several feet from a shelf and smashed into pieces on the floor. The three of them left the house and spent the night in a hotel. When they returned the following afternoon, everything appeared quiet, but after about 30 minutes, the women heard sounds of breaking glass coming from the kitchen and found the glasses and crockery being smashed. A cup flew through the air and narrowly missed Beck's mother, Lena. The women called the police, and over the following couple of weeks, officers regularly visited the property, trying to figure out what was causing all of the damage. A paranormal investigator was called in and was bruised by a glass that was thrown from down the hallway, and a series of bites and scratches appeared on the investigator. Strangely though, when Renata's mother Lena moved back to Germany, the paranormal activity suddenly ceased. Number 4. The Nollamara Poltergeist. Nollamara is a suburb about 8 kilometres north of Perth in Western Australia, and in the late 60s, unusual events terrorised a young family in their home. When Lee and Pat and their young child moved in to one of the oldest houses in Nollamara, almost immediately strange things started to happen. They just started a new business, and money was tight, so until they can get onto their feet, Lee advised his wife to go easy on the spending. No sooner had he said this when an envelope appeared in the letterbox containing $10. Nothing unusual about this, you would think, maybe a benevolent friend, until a few days later, when Pat was dusting the window frame, a $20 note fluttered down from the curtains. Again, you might think the previous owner had hidden the note above the curtain. Unusual thing to do, but that would have been the only rational explanation. However, one night when retiring to bed, they found 5 brand new $10 notes strewn on the bed. They did not feel good about this and felt uneasy. Something did not feel right, and they did not want to feel beholden to whatever or whoever was doing this, and placed the money in a cupboard. The next day, when they inspected the cupboard, the money had disappeared. Slowly things started to escalate, and one day when Pat was on the outside toilet, the catch slowly lifted up by itself, and the door suddenly opened. Another time as she went up to her bedroom, she found all of her clothes removed from the wardrobe and scattered on the floor. The entity then started to pester her husband Lee by taking his cigarettes, and also pelted him with pellets whilst he was trying to read a newspaper. On complaining about these missing cigarettes, the next day a brand new packet had appeared on the kitchen table. Returning to the house one evening, they found a stick of incense burning on the windowsill, and at Christmas time, a decorative ball disappeared from the Christmas tree and was found hanging on a tree in the garden. The entity then started stealing food, and on one occasion, a missing pair had appeared on their car seat. Another time, Pat had left a piece of stewing steak on the plate, and briefly left the room, and on returning, found the plate empty. In utter frustration, she screamed at the entity to return the meat, and a few minutes later, it reappeared on the plate. She then chopped the steak along with some vegetables and placed them into a pot on the stove. Then as she stood back, the pot was thrown violently on the floor, and the vegetables were scattered everywhere. But strangely, the meat was still in the pot. On another harrowing occasion, a kettle of warm water was tipped over her 18-month-old son. Unfortunately, he was unhurt, and at the same moment, a plate on the kitchen table was smashed. One time, her son was chewing some meat when it was suddenly snatched from his hands and disappeared. After attempting to exorcise the entity, they finally decided to move out, and thankfully, the entity did not follow them. Number 3. The South Shields Poltergeist. Pontefract is a town near South Shields in the northeast of England, and in 2005, a young couple named Mark and Marianne and their 3-year-old son were terrorised by a poltergeist. The activity started in December, where chairs were stacked, chests of drawers were moved, and doors were slammed. One night in bed, Marianne felt her son's toy dog hit her on the back of the head. And as she sat up and turned on the lights, a second stuffed dog was thrown in her direction. As the couple were cowering under their sheets, they felt something trying to pull them away. Then all of a sudden, Mark yelled in pain and 13 scratches appeared on his back. Though the scratches were gone the next morning, it was obvious the poltergeist was shown that it could cause direct physical harm to them. Its next terrifying act was to hang a rocking horse from the ceiling by its reins. Then it placed a large cuddly rabbit in a chair at the top of the stairs with a box cutter in its paws. The entity then left messages on the young boy's whiteboard and even sent text messages that couldn't be traced to any phone or computer. The threatening messages said, "You're dead." The family called in paranormal researchers Mike Hallowell and Darren Ritson. The experts determined that the activity was real and even wrote a book about it called The South Shields Poltergeist. In the book is a picture of a plastic bottle poised in an impossible position and a message on a magnetic drawing that said, "Just go now." Number 2. The Apothecable Poltergeist. In 1965, an 11-year-old girl named Marie Jose Ferreira was subject to the most infamous poltergeist activity in the history of Brazil. It began in her house in the city of Apothecable, when bricks and stones began to materialize out of thin air and smash things. Maria's family called in a priest to do an exorcism. This only angered the spirit, and the onslaught got worse. The largest rock found was 3.7 kilograms, and some of the stones were magnetic. When the rocks eventually stopped appearing, furniture started being thrown around. Maria was then attacked physically, where she was slapped and bitten, and ended up with bruises. Needles suddenly appeared embedded in Maria's skin, and on one occasion, 55 had to be removed from her ankle. The poltergeist held cups over her face to suffocate her in the night. The problems even followed her to school, and at one point her clothes spontaneously caught on fire in the lunchroom. The attacks went on for a year before Maria went to see a medium. The psychic said that Maria was being attacked by an angry entity, and then it planned to haunt Maria for her entire life. That life was sadly short. Maria poisoned herself when she was 16, and when she had died, paranormal activity suddenly stopped. Number 1. Galway Poltergeist. The following incident happened in Galway, Ireland, to the Fahey family in the early 90s, who started to experience strange paranormal events in their house. The first was a horrible smell that started to permeate throughout the house. Then after about a month, the smell slowly faded. Then one night, the parents were woken by a loud thump, and after going downstairs to inspect, found nothing. The next strange event was when their son and his girlfriend were awoken one night by a very bright pulsating white light in their bedroom, and both cowered in fear under the blankets. News of the strange events had gotten out, and one day they were visited by a stranger who said that about 30 years before the current houses had been built, there was an old farmhouse surrounded by open fields, and the man said he knew the people who had resided there, and they too had experienced strange happenings, such as their blankets being pulled off the bed, and would pray in terror. Meanwhile, in the current house, poltergeist activity started to escalate, such as bedroom doors being slammed shut and locked, the toilet flushing by itself, and in the lounge objects were being thrown around the room and a coffee table was upturned. The family immediately left the house in fear, but in all of the terror, the dog had been left in the backyard, and when one of them had returned to feed it, all of the lights in the house started to flash on and off. 2 days later, when they felt brave enough to re-enter the house, they found nothing but utter devastation. They did not stay and spent the evening in the neighbour's house. They then tried taping the noises, but the electronics went faulty. They then started to hear a baby cry, and when one of them went upstairs to inspect where it was coming from, a vase flew across the stairs and smashed. They called the priest to come out, where he gathered the family together to say mass. And as he started talking, a baby's crying got louder and louder. They were visited by Aideen Sheehan, a journalist from a Dublin newspaper, who was very sceptical about the events in the house. As they were talking in the kitchen, they heard loud crashes coming from the lounge, and on entering, found that pictures had flown off the walls, and a heavy TV had been pushed backwards, and a porcelain dog had somehow shattered. Aideen's scepticism had been put into question, as she had no explanation as to what could have caused it. They were visited by psychic Sandra Ramdahini, and on entering, she immediately felt the presence of a spirit who had not moved on, and felt the whole house needed healing, and had gotten all the family together around for a séance. The psychic had discovered that 100 years previously, a young monk and nun had murdered a newborn baby, because in those days they could not have faced the shame, and the spirit of the murdered baby had continued to haunt the house. The psychic was able to move the spirit on, and after that, the house was peaceful. Phantom attack. The following incident happened to George Stern in his truck, where he was in a location in Texas that was close to an Indian burial ground. He was called in by a subcontractor to do a cleanup after Hurricane Ike that hit Texas on September the 8th, 2008. George had called up a friend he'd been working with, which took them 2 weeks to clean everything up. As he was completing the job, he stayed on site because at the time he didn't have anywhere else to go or another job to go to, so he and his friend decided to stay on the property and sleep in their trucks. On their first night, as they were sleeping in their respective trucks, it was particularly cold, and there was some snow on the ground. It was around 8 p.m. when they went to bed early, and George was laying down with his head by the window. He had a 1995 Freightliner SLD flat top that had a single bed, and as he was lying down, he heard some sort of commotion outside the truck, and thought, what the hell was that? The wind was howling and blowing so hard, causing this truck to shake so badly that he felt it could tip over at any moment. The wind sounded like it was blowing about 60 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden it got worse and started to go crazy, and the sound outside had gotten even more violent. But then he could hear people talking, where he became even more confused. George was now thinking out loud and screaming, "It's just me and my buddy over here in our trucks," as he continued to hear the noise of talking and the wind blowing hard. As if that was not enough to cause concern, George then felt what appeared to be a hand come through the side window at the back of the truck, and he felt it touch him on the head. He started to throw his elbow back in an effort to hit the hand, and tried to push the hand off of his head before it suddenly went away. Then he heard the wind pick up even more, and now somebody was trying to open the door, which fortunately for him was locked. As his person, or whatever it was, continued to try and open his door, George stayed quiet, knowing he was secure in the fact that the truck was fully locked, when they were not able to break in, and the windows were fully wound up. But not to be deterred, the wind had somehow got inside the truck, causing total chaos, and made a horrible noise. It then proceeded to tear at everything he had inside the truck. George was now thinking, Lord, what the hell is going on? His back was turned to the front of the truck as he laid in the back, where he suddenly felt a pressure come and lay on top of him, and tried to pin him down on the bed as he loudly screamed, "Lord have mercy," but he could hardly hear himself talking, and his tongue felt so heavy that he was not able to get a word out. George was not able to speak until he eventually felt it lift off of him. All he saw was his curtains being thrown back before hearing it go through the door that sounded like a knife chopping something. He then immediately turned the lights on and grabbed the Bible and started to read and pray. To add further confusion to his terrifying ordeal, his friend, who was next door in his truck, heard nothing. His friend had gone up and saw the lights on and wondered what was going on at 3 a.m. in the morning. He had not heard his screaming. He had not heard a thing.